Hello again, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with Chris Clark to give you a recruiting update today. And Chris, we're going to talk numbers for the 2017 class today, and I'm curious to know how many Gamecocks will sign in 2017, who is committed at this point, and who are the Gamecocks still working on. Recruiting is year-round, Chris, obviously, and just trying to get a better handle on what the plan for this Muschamp staff is going to be.
When you look at the roster, there's a lot of holes to be filled. They need to upgrade a lot of positions. They need to restock some positions. There's some positions on the team where the coaching staff looks at it and probably feels pretty good. For instance, the tight end position has a couple guys, Hayden Hurst, Casey Crosby. Then they've got Kyle Markway and Jacob August, and they've got two that they really like from Will Muschamp's initial recruiting class too. So that'll give them 6 guys on the roster this preseason, and all 6 would be projected to be back next year too. So they've got one in 2017 and will register that's committed to arrive next summer. So, there's certain positions like that they feel good about. But then on the other hand, there's some where they wouldn't feel confident. The secondary, of course, would be one of those where right now USC only has 9 guys projected to return in the 2017 season off the roster, and that number could certainly be lower, and they really need to upgrade the talent. So there's not, a hard and fast number that we could attach to the entire class in terms of, okay, they'll sign 23 guys or 24, however many. But we do have a pretty decent idea about some of the positional numbers. 1 quarterback, couple running backs, 3 or 4 receivers, a tight end, 4 offensive linemen, 4 linebackers, 6 defensive backs, a handful of defensive linemen. Those are probably the numbers that you could look for in this class. And they'll really be prioritizing, upgrading the skill positions, continuing to try to get better in the trenches, and then the secondary is a gigantic priority.
Chris, you said 6 defensive backs. Who have the Gamecocks already got committed for next year that might be able to come in and play right away? That's a big number, 6.
Yeah, 6 is what they're targeting, and that's a position where they've made some progress with some guys. But there's several targets that are still on the board, and several guys that are big-time targets that are being recruited by a lot of different programs. And so anytime you have that, the competition's going to be stiff, and those are guys that, sometimes they're going to wait until later in the process. So, really the only guy that they've got from the previous class that's in the fold is Jamarcus King. That's the one guy that you could point to that's going to be able to help immediately from the 2016 class. He's projected, to enroll in May. At the end of May, and that'll allow them to go through part of the off-season program and get in and really contribute. There's nobody in the 2017 class, the one they're working on right now. There's nobody committed right now, but they got several guys on the board. A lot of 4-star kids, A.J. Terrell, Jemias Williams out of Georgia, Yusuf Corker's another talented guy out of Georgia with a nice offer list that they're in the lead for right now. Just several guys that they've got on the board, and like I said, they'd like to add 5 or 6, if possible, to really try to restock that secondary where South Carolina's had success in the past. They just don't have enough players there right now or enough talent.
Talking Gamecock football recruiting, taking a look ahead to 2017. Chris Clark and Emerson Phillips here on Gamecock Central Radio. You can download the Gamecock Central Radio app on the App Store and on Google Play to subscribe to the podcast. Search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. Chris, the Gamecocks have 3 offensive linemen already committed for 2017. Tell us about them.
Yeah, a couple of South Carolina products on that list. One of them is Summy Carlay from the Upstate, and he's a really interesting prospect. He started his high school career as a tight end, then he was moved over to the offensive line, put on a good bit of weight. He's a pretty athletic kid. He's someone who's aggressive. He's a smart kid, a really bright kid, and someone that South Carolina feels like has a lot of upside. He's someone that, really picked up his first major offer from South Carolina. He was sort of thought of as a smaller school guy initially, but he's really sort of come on and grown into his body and sort of developed, and they feel like he's a guy that they could bring in and really try to develop and make him into something. Dennis Daly out of Ridgeview is the other one. Now, he was placed a couple of cycles ago by South Carolina at junior college at Georgia Military. So he's a junior college kid now who's gotten bigger and stronger and, probably is versatile enough to play tackle or guard. May end up being a tackle for South Carolina. but a big kid who can get into space and moves pretty well. Eric Douglas is the other one out of Mallard Creek in Charlotte. Really good program, one of the best in the country. Will Muschamp coached DJ Humphreys, recruited DJ Humphreys to Florida. He was, a high NFL draft pick there out of Florida, and so there's some familiarity. And then Sean Elliott being held over. Douglas picked up his first offer from South Carolina last summer at camp and committed not too long ago after the coaching change. His teammate is T.J. Moore, a four-star offensive lineman, who's a big priority for this recruiting class for South Carolina. It's possible that South Carolina stands pat with four offensive linemen in this class if they can land T.J. Moore, and he'll be on campus this weekend along with Douglas for a visit, for sort of a social gathering for several of the top targets. So if they can get T.J. Moore, they give them four, and four that they'd feel pretty good about. It's possible they could take another one if it's a really good one, say another junior college player or another really good high school player, but they'd probably be happy with that group if they can land T.J. Moore and finish out that class.
Chris, Muschamp and this new staff have been incredibly active recruiting in-state players. I wanted to get you to give us an update on 3 in-state prospects, kids that are moving into their senior years of high school. Xavier Thomas is the defensive end from Wilson. Jay Urich, Wes Mitchell reported here on Gamecock Central last week that he had picked up an offer from South Carolina. He's the quarterback from Wren. And Ortre Smith, the number 1 prospect in the state for the upcoming year. He'll be a senior at Wando High School, wide receiver. All 3 have expressed interest in South Carolina, and the Gamecocks are working on all 3 of these guys. So what can you tell us about them? What's the latest on them?
Well, with Thomas, he'll be on campus this coming weekend, as will Urich. Ortre Smith has prom this weekend. He's not making any college visits, but Xavier Thomas, one of the top 2018 prospects in the country, several schools after him. Clemson and South Carolina are thought to be the front runners based on what Thomas says. It's really expected to go down to the wire with an in-state battle. It's been back and forth. South Carolina's made a really big push since Muschamp's hire and really have gotten into the best position they've ever been in at any point in that recruitment. That doesn't mean it's over by any means. Clemson countered recently with a spring game visit for Thomas, but USC will counter that by getting him back on campus this weekend, and I think really that's sort of how this one's going to go, back and forth. And Thomas has really enjoyed all the visits he's taken. He's been pretty impressed, and boy, as you can imagine, with all the attention that's been shown and the prioritization of all these programs, even Florida State and Ohio State, some other schools have been in there and really impressed him. So it'll probably be back and forth. Urich is a guy who can throw the ball pretty well, is a pretty good athlete for his size, and I think South Carolina feels like he's a guy they can bring in, will be really good in the locker room, and is someone who's not going to be early impact like a McElwain or a Jake Bentley, but is someone they can bring along and develop and see what they have later in his career. Ortre Smith, South Carolina has been in good position, but now the caveat is Clemson is ramping up its pursuit. His mother attended Clemson. Clemson is a school that, has been one that Ortre and his family have had their eyes on too. Now, it's helped South Carolina that Clemson has not pursued as much. South Carolina's made them a big priority. That'll be a card that they can continue to play during the recruiting process. But now that Clemson has amped up its pursuit, it'll become a more interesting battle. And certainly, could Clemson prove tough to beat in the end, given all the ties and the success that they've had with skill position players lately? Sure, that's fair to say, but wouldn't count out South Carolina. They've done a really good job with them. Will Muschamp's personally recruiting. So they've got some things going for them, too, and it'll be an interesting battle. It just got more interesting given the direction this one's taken.
Bailey Hart is walking on at South Carolina, and apparently Ortre Smith and Hart have a good relationship. Any chance that, Hart's relationship with Smith helps bring him to South Carolina?
Oh, yeah, can't hurt. Certainly that's a move that, just another card that South Carolina can play. I fully think that Ortre will make his own decision, and even with, his mother's ties to Clemson, I think that's the case too. I think she wants him to make his own decision. I think he will. So there's just a lot of interesting pushes and pulls and a lot of variety of factors that are playing into the recruitment. And I think his his choice is going to be even tougher down the stretch now, given everything on both sides.
Chris, I talked with Josh Stepp, the head coach at Lexington High School, and Lexington played Wando last year, and Coach Stepp said that Lexington couldn't guard him, and I don't know that anybody could guard him last year. He had a huge year last year. This is a big part of the reason why he's the number one prospect in the state, and Coach Stepp over at Lexington said he was glad that Lexington would not be facing Wando again because Ortre Smith was just such a physical specimen and a very difficult cover.
Oh, yeah. I watched him play in person last year, and, he's got to be more consistent catching the ball. Believe it or not, there'll be some easy balls every now and then where you just maybe have a concentration lapse or whatever it may be. And then, next play he'll come down with, an incredible leaping catch. Watched him play last season, forget the opponent actually, and he caught, I think, 3 touchdown passes in that game. Had a really big game. Had some highlight reel catches. So he really is a player with a lot of upside and a lot of ability.
Chris, we appreciate you. Thanks for the update today.
All right, thanks, Emerson.
All right, he's Chris Clark, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and we appreciate you joining us for Gamecock Football Recruiting Talk here on Gamecock Central Radio.